Hello and welcome to episode 7 of MMO Weekly, presented as always by MetsmerizedOnline.com. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, along with MMO executive editor Mike Mayer. Mike, it's been a good homestand in Queens. How we feeling?
Feeling good, yeah. Mets swept all 6 games during the homestand, and which is a good thing to do because now they head out west for a bunch of tough games.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be also just nice to not see the Phillies in the Nationals anymore, I guess, jersey-wise. Team-wise, it's been nice. Like we said, the Mets swept the series this weekend. I'm not going to go too much into the Philly series here. I want to talk more about Sunday and Nick Plummer. Obviously, it seems like, with his kind of emergence here over the last few days and with the Mets needed pitching, that might have been, a factor with Dom Smith getting demoted there. But Plummer has a huge home run on the top of the 9th inning. Mets come back there. I was at the game Sunday night. Stadium was rocking. Haven't heard it that ladder wasn't buzzing like that in a long time. 8th inning, obviously, Nick Castellanos likes to hit, heartbreaking home runs. Did that in the 8th against Ottavino, but it's just this team's never out of it, and I know Marte has said as much, when they fall behind and stuff, sometimes they like it. They like to come back, but, big game Sunday night to have the sweep against the Phillies, like I said, with Plummer having his kind of, early signature moment with the Mets. So just want to get your thoughts on that before we, talk about the Washington series.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a huge moment for Plummer to have his first big league hit be a game-tying home run in the 9th inning. And then next day he had another home run and a double. I think just the kind of focus on Plummer a little bit. When Janikowski got hurt, obviously that's the reason why his broken finger, that's why Plummer came up. And a lot of Mets fans were kind of like dark and gloomy because Janikowski's kind of become a fan favorite or whatever. But the reality is Janikowski's kind of just a defensive player, really. He does well in center field, left field, and right field, and he gives the Mets some value there. And he can bunt and he can steal, but his hot, fluky offensive start had really cooled down. His OPS was not great. He was down, the OPS plus was down to 60, I think, when he got hurt. So, I mean, he's a limited player. There's a reason why he's bounced around a little bit, and he's 30 as a bench player. So I think when that happened, a lot of fans were kind of down. And when Plummer got called up, I obviously don't want to see someone get hurt, but I was trying to tell people, I think the Mets are actually better in this case. Plummer's a better player than Janikowski. Obviously, he's not as good a defender as Janikowski in the outfield, but he's a very solid defender that can also play all 3 spots. And again, not as fast as Janikowski, but he's only a notch below. He's got some good speed. And the huge difference is the offensive potential. I mean, even before that, he was slugging over 500 in AAA, and he had a big year last year in the Cardinals system. So yeah, this is a guy that's a pretty well-rounded player, and that walks a lot too. He had an OBP around 400 last year. So, I guess thank you, Cardinals, for some reason letting him become a free agent. And I mean, the Mets saw enough in him that they gave him a major league deal without him even playing in the big leagues yet. So, I mean, this isn't some guy that just came out of nowhere. He was a pretty solid prospect. And, it's kind of funny. He does really well, and that how good the Mets are right now is they have so many guys hitting well, is that then Plummer finds himself out of the lineup for a couple of days, but it's just, he'll get back in there. And it's a nice element to have another guy with some pop on the Mets. I mean, we've talked about this quite a bit, is that even when the Mets have been scoring runs this year, they've kind of missed that power element at times, and 2 home runs already. And the Mets themselves over the last, before today, they had homered in 8 straight games and had 13 home runs in that span. So they're starting to wake up, like we talked about, the power starting to wake up a little bit as a team, and Plummer kind of helped ignite that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, Plum, we talked about he's a 2015 first round pick. Obviously it took him a little while. I think he may have had some injuries kind of along the road as well. I think he had a bad 2019 season in the minors. Obviously 2020 is a wash with COVID. And then, like you said, he kind of resurrected his career last year in the minors. So, it's just another guy, that next man up mentality. You give the front office a lot of credit for doing their diligence of picking up a guy, like you said, who, for whatever reason, the Cardinals decided to not hang on to. It's as far as the losing Jankowski, obviously, like you said, he was kind of a fan favorite there. And, what he brought, defense late in games, good defense and speed, as we know. But it's so huge to have a guy like Plummer who can kind of still do those things, like you said, but also, have some pop at the bat. And obviously you see, what the Mets were looking for when they signed them, hit a couple home runs his first couple of days starting, which was awesome. It's just interesting, this team, as far as it's always kind of the next man up. There's always somebody a different night kind of picking them up. Starling Marte's gotten red hot over the last few days as far as, the home run ball is concerned. I know you talked about that. It's funny. I know we kept talking about when the weather heats up, things will turn for them home run wise, and it kind of seems like it has. So, that's nice to see. But, it's more of a testament to when they weren't hitting, a lot of home runs. Not that they have, crazy now. They're doing a little bit more power wise, but they can manufacture runs. And I think, it's funny. I kind of had like a long look at this over the last week or so. I've been critical of Buck, kind of to start the year. And I think some things are warranted as far as how he handles, some bullpen things in that nature. But, for years, I've been, waiting for a Mets team that gets hits in bunches, moves runners over, does the little things right, can manufacture runs. And this team does exactly that. So, I was thinking a lot about that and how, Buck may not be kind of the best at certain points, but his fingerprints are all over this team. And it's obvious that what they're doing is successful and sustainable. So it's been a lot of fun there. And, obviously you talked about guys coming out of nowhere. I guess we need to talk about Luis Guillerme, huh?
Yeah.
Patrick and I talked a little bit about him last week when he first started kind of heating up, but man, I didn't know he turned into Jeff Kent all of a sudden. Mike, hit me up with some numbers here or something. This is wild.
Yeah, I mean, his 413 average in May was the 10th highest for any month from any Met. His 477 OBP was in the top 20 of any month ever. So, yeah, Luis Guillerme, he's been on base like crazy. He's finally getting an opportunity. He hasn't really, I mean, he's had some like couple week spans where he's gotten run like this when players have got hurt in the past. And I mean, he was pretty solid offensively last year, but we're talking on a different level right now. We're talking about a guy that's hitting 360 and has an on base over 400. So, I mean, I don't think anyone expected that out of Guillerme over a stretch like this. Yeah, he's still playing great defense. So you have to keep him in the lineup, whether however you kind of maneuver it. Obviously, he's played at mostly second base lately. I mean, you've seen him and Lindor turning some great double plays. It's fun to watch those two guys play together. And then again, you're talking about the versatility of Jeff McNeil that allows them to do this. It allows you to slide McNeil into the outfield where he's played pretty well too this year. I think Guillerme, we got a long stretch of games coming, so maybe he'll see some time over at third where Escobar is still struggling, so they can get all the outfielders in, like we talked about with Plummer, getting him some playing time in Canna. And then Nimmo is back today. So you have to imagine Nimmo is going to be in the lineup going forward. So it'll be, yeah, we've talked about, and the Mets broadcast have talked about quite a bit, how Buck is ensured that all of these guys have gotten playing time. And now with Dom Smith sent down too, that you have that opening where those less at bats, you have the opening to get guys like Guillerme at bats. JD Davis, who actually has looked really good the last couple of days, he has opening for some more at bats. It's tough to sit anyone right now. I mean, Tomas Nido had 4 hits today. I mean, when Nido is breaking out the bat, then the whole team is hot. It's just like we said, the power is nice. Now it's like that power is that added plus for them. Like, this is a team that's going to score runs. because they run the bases pretty well. They hit in the clutch pretty well. They make the pitchers throw a lot of pitches. They walk a ton. I mean, they have a lot of guys that have been walking a lot this year. And let's face it, they get hit. They've been hit quite a bit too. So, I mean, you're getting on base that way. So this is a team that's going to score runs. And then once you add that power element, it's on another level. It's in the top tier in the National League. And it's going to have to be over the next stretch. So hopefully these guys stay hot and keep hitting on all cylinders.
Yeah, well, and I'll get to Dom Smith in a minute. I want to ask you more about that, obviously. But you talk about guys who are red hot. You know, Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor have a great May. I know more so Alonso, but the last few weeks Lindor too. How key is it now? You know, especially, I think more so we knew what Pete Alonso was. I think we were kind of waiting for him to take this kind of next step. Is right now look like an MVP candidate. But as far as Lindor goes. Are you surprised at all kind of how much he seemed to have now settled in, and especially with runners on, he's so he bears down so much and really simplifies things, and gets a lot of base hits that way, which has been awesome. But I just want to kind of get your thoughts on Lindor's kind of transformation here from year 1 to year 2.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because you look at the numbers for Lindor, and obviously he had a monster month driving in runs. He had 28 RBIs. That's tied for second in the month of May.
And,
yeah, Pete Alonso is the only guy that's ever had more in a month of May, and he did it this year. But Lindor actually had a lower OPS this month. He was just, for some reason, whenever there was guys on, he drove them in. I mean, he's got an RBI in 10 straight games now. The only player with a Mets uniform to have a longer RBI streak is Mike Piazza. So, I mean, that's pretty good company to be in. It's what I think one of the things I've noticed is kind of with guys on is he's kind of shortened his stroke a little bit. And he's not a guy that goes the other way a ton, but we've seen it a little bit over the last week when there's guys on. He's gone that way a little bit more. So maybe that's something he's going to try to do more often, especially with runners on. Maybe Jeff McNeil's rubbing off on him. But yeah, he's stepping up in the big spots. And like you said, Alonso had the great month too. He set the record for May RBIs with 30. He had 9 home runs. I mean, that's the thing we were talking about the Mets' power as an overall product, and that's driven by Alonso. And he finally had that big power month. He had 9 home runs this month. And that's what you were kind of waiting for. But he's not striking out very much either. He's getting on base. He's got a ton of walks. He's got like 8 walks in the last 20 plate appearances, so he's walking a ton too. And that's good because I think when you see Alonso struggling, it's him chasing. That's when he gets in these bad funks and he's chasing a lot of sliders outside the zone. And right now, he's rarely chasing, and he's not missing any pitches. He's not getting a ton of pitches to hit right now, but when he does, he's not missing anything. So when you have Lindor and Alonso like that driving in almost 75% of their RBI chances, you're going to score runs because you have like Canna, Guillerme, who filled in for Nimmo for a while, and then Nimmo. I mean, these are guys that are going to get on base a ton, and it's nonstop, this lineup. There's no automatic out most of the time, and it's tough for a pitcher to get through this lineup.
Yeah, no, I agree, and there's a lot I want to unpack there. But as far as just Alonso's concerned, I think and even Lindor, especially with runners on, I think that they're now a product of obviously kind of Buck's philosophies, but also it's a lot to do with Eric Chavez. He's seemed to obviously really simplify either the information that they're getting or the game plan that they're doing. And, the difference from last year to this year and the last couple of years, this year is night and day. A lot of times in years past, especially the last couple of years with runners on, and especially with 2 outs, guys look lost. They looked in between in their swing, like they had one plan and maybe they weren't pitched that way and they didn't really know what to do. It just looks like the approaches with runners on, every hitter that they have shorten up, either hit the ball up the middle the other way, and just try and keep the chain moving, get that runner and bring to the next guy. I got to give Chavez a lot of credit there. And also the roster construction. They're constructed with guys now who aren't, Keith was talking a little about, it's not all sluggers, right? It's guys that can get hits and bunches and keep the wheel moving. And this is a team that seems to really have taken to that and are doing it quite well. So I got to, give a lot of credit there. As far as, Guillerme is concerned, he's a high contact, low strikeout guy. And like you said, he never hadn't had a lot of opportunities in the past to play a lot every day. Like you said, a couple weeks here and there. But, our friend of the show, Cody Decker, talked about how impressed he was with Guillerme, when he played within the minors. Said he could be like a batting champion in the major league. Said maybe, we got to hit the gym a little bit more. But I think we're going to call Luis Guillerme the bad body basher from now on. That's my coin to my friends. So we're going to bring it here now. He's the bad body basher. For all the guys out there don't look good in uniform, it don't matter. You could still do it really well. So shout out Luis. He just had to shave the beard. And once he grew it back in, it seems like, he got his powers back. So maybe all the Mets should try and do something like that.
Yeah, I guarantee you the next guy that gets into a slump is shaving his head or his beard or whatever he can do to get back into. I mean, because it coincides with him shaving his beard. It really does. So it's kind of crazy. It's good. I mean, that's part of the lineup is you have a slugger in Alonso, you have Lindor who has power, but you have these guys like Guillerme and Nimmo and McNeil. All these guys are getting on base, and McNeil and Guillerme aren't striking out. And Marte's starting to show his power too. He's looked like more of a power hitter recently, and Canna is showing more power. So, yeah, I mean, it just lengthens this lineup, all of those guys, and keep saying it, but it's just there's no great way to maneuver this lineup unless, I mean, you got someone like Escobar who struggled a little bit, but I don't think he's going to be a 630 OPS guy all year. So he's gonna heat up too, and he's kind of a guy that typically does heat up with the weather too. Mm-hmm. So I can only imagine we could see a nice stretch from him. And I mean, out west would be perfect time for it to happen, and it would make sense if it did happen then. So.
Yeah, no, and you brought up Escobar, but he's kind of been the odd man out, particularly really struggling, the last month plus. But contact doesn't slump. I think we've seen that throughout the sport. Contact doesn't slump. You have guys who have a high contact rate, continue to put the ball in play first approach. Good things happen. That stuff like that. You can't go in long stretches of not scoring runs with a lot of guys like that. You have a lot of guys, 7, 8, 9 guys in your lineup that are looking to hit home runs. That's when the slump can happen for a prolonged time. We saw that last year. As far as McNeil's concerned, I think last season was the best thing that ever happened to him. Getting so pull happy and trying to hit the ball in the air, I think he realized that he's not going to make any money doing that. His game is being a wizard with the bat and placing the ball when he can and jumping on pitches and ambushing pitches when he needs to, right? Because he can keep pitchers honest that way. But he's made a total transformation back to the guy that, we knew he could be. Defensively, you brought up how versatile he is. He's a plus defender everywhere he goes at this point. He gets more impressive. I'd like to see him not smash his face into walls all the time. I would like to have him play every day. But I appreciate the effort, obviously. And, guys run – they run everything out. Guys run hard to first base. A play like McNeil, they were down like 8 runs when he, smashed his face into the wall, trying to slide for, make a slide and catch. These guys play hard. They want to be out there. And it shows and it goes a long way.
Yeah. And I think like a good point of that is just the other day, they had a guy in first and a ground ball that even Garrett Cohen thought was going to be an easy double play. Mm-hmm. The runner beat it, and then the Mets went on to score 3 runs in the inning. And you've seen that a couple of times this year where it's something as simple as that, where the pitcher makes his pitch and he thinks he's getting out of the inning because he sees where the ball's hit. And then next thing you know, he's still got a guy in first with 1 out, and he's still going to work through this lineup. So, yeah, that's another aspect of just simple running the ball out. And they have a lot of guys. I mean, outside of Alonso, who's still a very good hustler, and whoever the catcher is, this isn't a slow team whatsoever. They have a bunch of guys that at least have solid speed. So that helps the scoring too. So I think that kind of brings us to what we're going to talk about next, and that's the Dodgers. So this is where we get to see just how good the offense is, because the Dodgers have the best ERA in baseball. And and the Mets are going to face most of their good pitchers. They're going to face Gonsolin. They're going to face Urias. They're going to face Buehler, and they're going to face the fourth one is spacing on me right now.
Yeah, it looks like it's Goslin, Tyler Anderson, Buehler, and then Urias closes it out.
Oh yes, Anderson, who's been terrific for them this year. So, and the Mets are facing two lefties in that group too, who they've kind of struggled against this year a little bit. After the win today against the lefty, they're 8-8 versus left-handed starters, which is obviously a big drop down from what they're doing against right-handed starters. So, yeah, so that's even with the Mets having good pitching, it's going to be a tough matchup for them to. You don't want to say just a split is good, but I mean, looking at who you're going to have to face, I think you come away with a split end that is pretty good. Again, the Dodgers have the best ERA in baseball, but they also have the best OPS in baseball too. So there's a reason why these guys have the best winning percentage in baseball as we speak.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I caught some heat today from some folks on Twitter. I tweeted that, now this stretch is going to see if the Mets can play with the big boys. And people got mad at me and said, the Mets are the big boys. What are you talking about? Well, however you want to slice it, the Dodgers are the best team in baseball. The Mets are going into this stretch now against these next three series without DeGrom, without Scherzer, and probably Miguel. I know they said he might make it back for the West Coast, but I'm just presuming. You got to presume he's not. A split, if they can go 5-5 on that road trip, you take that, you run with it, and that's a team that then becomes, to me, a legitimate World Series contender. If you can weather that storm, listen, the pitching's been good. Walker's been great his last couple of times out. Bassett's been good. I know his last couple of starts may be a little, shakier than you'd like, but, they're going against, especially in the Dodgers, a really, really good team. I think someone tweeted me and said between the Dodgers, the Padres, and the Angels, that's who they're playing now in these next three series, they have a combined 11-game losing streak or something. Big deal. It's June. They're still good teams.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that the Mets aren't good. I'm saying that this is the toughest part of their schedule. Historically, we know what happens in June. So if they can come out of this stretch at 500 ball, that's a win. That's a major win in my book. You do have to take it with a grain of salt, right? I look back at 2015. The Mets, I don't think beat the Cubs at all in 2015, either, or they went 2-7 or 0-9. I think I'm pretty sure the Cubs beat the Mets every game in the regular season. And then they saw them in the playoffs, and the Mets swept them. So obviously things can change, but with who the Mets have played so far this year, listen, they've played some teams that for the most part are not good, right? The Phillies, the Nationals, they've played a lot of bottom feeders, but as good teams, they beat up on the weaker teams, but that's what you're supposed to do. But now this is the first real test for them. This is a stretch of teams. Obviously, the Padres, I know, haven't been scoring runs of late. Our friend might be getting the axe there. We'll get into that a little bit later. But these are still some of the top teams in the National League. And obviously the Angels, they didn't do well the other night. Yankees, they have Noah Syndergaard, can't even, pitch well against the Yankees for me. But, we don't have to go into that. But these are playoff contending teams, much better caliber teams the Mets have played so far. So this is a litmus test for them. No one's saying they're not a good team. The Mets are a good team. They're a playoff contending team. But this is, at this point, a good litmus test, in my opinion, of where they can be at. So I just was wondering if you kind of felt the same or not as much there.
Yeah, I mean, they ended up with a 10.5 game lead going into June, which is tied for the third highest in Major League history. So they've created themselves a pretty good cushion. But yeah, like you said, with the Dodgers, the Giants, Angels, and then the first series when they get back home with the Brewers, you're talking about three of the best teams in the National League outside of the Mets, and then the Angels, who are a contending team in the AL. I think they've been – they've played the Giants pretty well this year already, and they've played some other teams pretty well. I think – obviously it's a good test. But, I think if you came away – it's weird to say with a team that's 17 games over 500, but if you came away 5-5 from this road trip, I think that's perfectly fine. I mean, you're going in there without McGill likely for – most of that stretch, going in without Scherzer, going in without DeGrom. And if you come away 500 from that, you're still on a really good trajectory going into the second half of June. Likely you go 500 there and you still probably have a double-digit lead potentially. That's as long you keep building or keep that lead right where it is until you get guys like McGill, Scherzer, and DeGrom back, and you're looking really, really good. So, yeah, 5-5 would be a good stretch. Definitely good for them.
Yeah, if they want to go 9-1 like the '06 Mets did when they had the West Coast trip, that's fine. That's great. I will love that. I love being wrong. I like the Mets to be really good. Just going in with honest expectations and playing good teams, and not to keep beating a dead horse, but like we said, if they can go 500 during that stretch with the guys they have out, I think you totally take that and run because, like you said, they have a big cushion in the division. So something like that, it's only probably going to keep them about the same, unless one of these other teams, Braves, somebody else maybe start going on a tear. We'll see what happens. I don't want to never say never because we thought they were out of the deadline and we saw what happened last year with them. So you can never say you're out of it, but I think they're in a good spot. As they head into this year. And it'll be interesting. It's a pain in the butt for us. We got to be up. We got to wait till 10 o'clock to watch the Mets now for a while. But it's always fun when they go over there and play teams like the Dodgers and the Padres and stuff, and seeing teams that we don't get to see a whole lot. As long as we can stay up for it, so it should be exciting there.
Yeah, and to touch on something you were going to kind of bring up is everyone was, since the Mets cut Cano and he signed with the Padres, everyone kind of had this series circled like, well, geez, how many hits is Cano going to have in that series? Well, the answer very well is looking like 0. He has started off his Padres career 3 for 32 with 10 strikeouts, and has been reported by a couple of folks tonight that the Padres are going to cut Cano. It's just a matter of how it happens. They're trying to get him to be okay to go into the minor leagues.
Right.
His OPS plus coming into today was 10. The league average is 100, and his is at 10. So, yes, he's been one of the worst players in baseball, as I noted today, with a negative 0.9 WAR from Fangraphs.
Is that bad? Says
yeah.
Negative bad? It's not like golf. You don't want the less. Okay.
So, there's a couple of things going on here. Obviously, this just cements that obviously the Mets really made the right call with Cano. And yeah, it'll be kind of interesting to see. Just it sounded like the Mets were willing to do the same thing with him,
right?
Send him to the minors, and he was unwilling to do that at the time. So it'll be interesting to see if he's, after a really, really bad stretch for the Padres, if he's finally relegated to the fact, well, this might be my only chance to kind of keep going is to go to the minor leagues. So. Yeah, it doesn't look like we're going to see Robinson Cano out in San Diego.
Yeah, I'm not going to lose much sleep over that. And speaking of guys, minor league wise, obviously the Mets, optioned Dom Smith to AAA. I think at first it was a little shocking just because, obviously Cano was kind of basically cut, obviously, thinking that, so Dom Smith would get more at bats and things like that. I think he had like 100 plate appearances this year, just been struggling. You got to assume at this point that, that the Mets are hoping he'll hit well down there, and then, come trade deadline time that they can, find the suitor and can get him somewhere to play every day or whatever. But I just kind of want to get your thoughts on kind of the Dom saga here and, what you think his kind of, next steps of his Mets career are going to be.
Yeah, it's been a kind of a crazy year for Dom. Like the DH came, so Mets fans are like, oh, this is good. We can cycle through like Davis, Dom, and Alonso and kind of get all of them enough at bats and keep Davis and Smith sharp off the bench while Alonso starts most of the time. But the DH slot gives them those at bats, and hopefully that'll help. Neither Smith or Davis have had a good start this season. Obviously, Davis has been slightly better, and Smith has the option. And then you had the almost trade to the Padres. Smith was almost traded to the Padres. It was out there for a while. It kind of looked like it was going to be a done deal. I know Smith, I talked to some of his family members even before spring training happened, that he thought he might get traded. So, that's been something that's been hovering over him for a while. And let's be honest, it feels like since Dom came up, there's always been trade rumors simply because you have Alonso there at first. And as soon as he came to the big leagues, he showed that he's a star. So what do you do with Dom? They played him out in left. that didn't work out well, so we don't see that anymore. So the trade hovered over him. He had that great 2020. After that, he really hasn't done much to say that he's a major league hitter. So the Mets are at a point now where you can't just give him that roster spot. He's got to prove that he's a big league hitter. We'll see what happens. He hasn't been in Syracuse lineup yet. He wasn't. They had an early game today, so he didn't play today. So I'm sure tomorrow will probably be his first game. I think maybe from a Mets standpoint at this point, you really hope he mashes a lot in AAA, and maybe you can spin him for some pitching. I'm not sure at this point if Dom Smith is really a fit for the Mets roster. I just don't see how it really works out at this point. He was basically just getting at bats as a DH and sometimes subbing in late for games from Alonso. Alonso's shown that he's going to play every game this year. So there isn't going to be those type of bats. And if you have Guillerme doing like he is, you have to find him at bats, and that means DHing some other guys. And if Davis finally picks it up like he's looked good recently, he's got a DH. I just don't think Dom ends up back in a Mets uniform again at the big league level. I think he gets traded for, obviously his trade value isn't very high right now, but maybe you can get a depth arm for him at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's unfortunate because you root for the guy. He had a great year in 2019 as a part-time player. Obviously, he had the foot thing that kept him out for a while, and he had the walk-off home run that ended the season, and he had the good 2020 and kind of the shortened year. But yeah, between last year and this year, you don't know really what to kind of peg. And I agree that he's probably not really a fit here anymore for what he has. I don't think he's not a major league player. I just think he needs to be somewhere that they're going to, back him up as far as playing every day and, working through his growing pains. And, I think he'll be a solid major leaguer for somebody else. Just, you kind of said it, how it just stinks that like his trade value totally plummeted, after the season started with how he's been. But I do think you won't see him as a Met only if, let's say he does rake down in AAA, which, he should. He should go down there and do well. You don't want to bring him back up then and him struggle and then lose, if you made any value for him, trade-wise, and then you lose it again. So I would imagine if he's raking down in AAA, they're going to try and just make the most of it. And like you said, maybe a depth arm or something like that. It's a sad probably ending to his Mets tenure, but, just honestly wish him the best. And if he does land somewhere else, hopefully he does well. I never wish anybody really ill will like that. He always hustled while he was here. He did everything he could. Things didn't work out. So hopefully if he lands somewhere else, he lands on his feet.
Yeah, absolutely. Dom's kind of had, like we've talked about, a kind of tough spot in his Mets career where he's really had a tough place to break out. I do think he'll end up somewhere else, and wish him nothing but the best. I think there's a chance he could be a major leaguer, and hopefully wherever he ends up, if he does get traded, he gets those at-bats that he needs. So I think now's a good time to transition to let's slide right into the minor league talk. Since
absolutely, he's going to co-host. Nice transition there. We like it. All right, Mike, hit us who we should be looking at for this week in the Mets minors.
Yeah, so in the past we haven't had much to talk about with Syracuse. It's kind of been a black hole to this point, but Mark Vientos went on a tear in May and had an OPS over 1,000 and had 6 home runs in 18 games. Obviously, this is kind of what the Mets were waiting for. They know he has the power. He just kind of finally needed to show it. Again, he's kind of a guy that historically starts slow and kind of heats up with the weather. So, it's not a huge surprise. And he's looked great over the last 20 games and offensively, I should say. I will note that his defense has still been a struggle at third base, and he's played a little bit of first so far this year. So we'll kind of see what the Mets decide to do going forward. But it's great to see him hitting the ball and showing a ton of power. And like we talked about with the DH spot, Vientos is on the 40-man roster, and if a guy like Davis does continue to struggle and Smith gets traded or continues to struggle, at some point you at least have to think about him being able to hit at the major league level, and if the Mets want to go that route. But other names in Syracuse, Cleo Lee started off horrendously this year. He was OPS under 500 at one point. He got sent down to St. Lucie for a stretch just to kind of clear his head. He's been back with Syracuse for a week, and he's looked great. He had 2 more hits today, and he had an OPS of 900 coming into today over the week. So, yeah, I mean, he's another important guy. I mean, if, say, Plummer gets hurt then, or another outfielder gets hurt, Lee's likely the guy that gets called. So it's great to see him kind of bounce back after a pretty serious demotion all the way to St. Lucie and get back to hitting again. And then the two arms that I want to talk about in the Syracuse bullpen, they just got promoted to Syracuse today, is Bryce Montes de Oca and Mikael Otanez. Both of these guys throw 102. And I'm not talking like, this isn't like hot guns 102. This is legit 102. They've both hit it multiple times this year. They both pitched today through a scoreless inning, and each of them threw a scoreless inning in the AAA debut. So, I mean, these guys are right on the cusp. Neither are on the 40-man roster, but the Mets have some wiggle room there. So, to have both of these guys that are consistently throwing 100, with both of them have pretty good sliders too. And Otanez has shown better control of the two this year, but everyone I talk to raves about both of these guys and say, yeah, these guys are going to pitch in the big leagues at some point this year. So it'll be interesting to see when, and it'll be nice to have another power arm in the Mets pen whenever they do. We've seen Holderman come up and pitch really well. I mean, he's been a huge bright spot for the Mets coming from AAA. We mentioned him earlier this year as an option to come up, and he's done well. So maybe one of these guys are likely in that next group. And then going down to Binghamton, Francisco Alvarez, he's hot again. He's number 3 on Baseball America's hot sheet after having a nice week where he had 3 home runs. He's hitting for power again. He's hitting for average. He's getting some walks, and it looks good. He's looked solid behind the plate too. Yeah, I mean, he went in a deep slump, but this isn't a guy I was ever really worried about. So I think this is even more impressive to show you that this 20-year-old went in this deep slump in AA against some pretty good pitching and bounced back and had a huge week. So this is a huge plus for him to be able to bounce back and make those adjustments. Going down to Brooklyn next. They're scoring a ton of more runs. They scored 20 runs recently in one game. They scored 10 again this week. It's kind of a mixture of guys that are doing it for them. The leadoff guy, outfielder Rowdy Jordan, is having a good season. Brandon McIlrain, who we've mentioned a little bit before, the football player, he's had a good stretch. And even Jalen Palmer has woken up a little bit recently and is showing some power. So the Cyclones are finally scoring some runs for a pitching staff that's still pitching well. That now includes some of the 2021 draftees that we've talked about a lot, in Carson Seymour and Mike Bassel, 2 of those. And lefty Nathan Lavender actually got promoted to Brooklyn today too. So we're seeing more and more of the draftees from last year pitching well and getting promoted. And then we go down to St. Lucie Mets, where for so much of the year, the talk was about Alex Ramirez, and rightfully so. He had an OPS over 1,000 for a while. And he's cooled down. His OPS is right around 830, which is bound to happen again. This kid's only 19. He's going to go through some struggles. But the other outfielders are kind of the ones that are shining now, the other St. Lucie Mets outfielders. Omar De Los Santos now has 23 stolen bases to lead the Mets minors, and he also hit his 7th home run the other day. Oh. Coming into today, he actually led the Mets minor leagues with his weighted runs created plus of 143. And second on right behind him was Carlos Dominguez, another St. Lucie Mets outfielder. He hit his 11th home run yesterday to take over the lead for the Mets farm system. So the outfield in St. Lucie is just beaming with talent. You have to wonder at some point which one or two of them end up with Brooklyn to kind of keep helping out that offense. And then finally, kind of finish it off, is the fact that the Mets, St. Lucie Mets, got some really young pitching. Joel Diaz got added to the roster last week, 18 years old. He's top 10 in the Mets system by everyone. I think Baseball America actually has him number 9. And he struggled a little bit in his first outing. He gave up some runs in the first inning, but then threw 3 scoreless after, and he was up to 97 on the gun. So we're talking about an 18-year-old pitching in full season baseball, and he's up to 97. So, yeah, there's a lot of things to be positive about in the Mets system right now. I would say I don't want negative, but Brett Beatty is on the injured list right now in AA. I've been told it's just a minor injury and that he should be back relatively soon. So, I mean, that's really the only one negative I can think of, and it doesn't sound like it's anything too serious with him. So between Vientos hitting, Alvarez hitting, and some of these high-octane arms getting closer to the big leagues, that it's definitely been a good month for the Mets prospects.
Love it. Love to hear it. Things are bright down on the farm, and can't wait for the draft to happen in a month or so, whenever, assume when that is, because it's going to be hopefully a franchise changer for them, as we know, we've spoken on here. Good stuff, Mike. We'll check back in with everybody after the Dodgers series. Hopefully everything goes well, and until then, let's go Mets, guys.